Welcome, friends. This is a Lovely Yarn podcast, and my name is Amber. Today's episode is a special episode in which I'm going to be talking about all of my favorite knitting tools that I've used over the years as a pretty prolific knitter. I am a basic girl. I do not really care for gadgets. So this list is going to be one that is pretty simple. There's not a lot of extra fluff in the tools that I'm going to be showcasing today, but I always find it quite interesting to see what other knitters like to include in their knitting bag, and I thought maybe you would like a peek inside of mine. Okay, so besides yarn, the most important thing we need for knitting is our needles. Would you agree? So I want to share my favorite needles. I actually have 3 different sets that I use quite a bit that I bounce back and forth. And that is because I have my ChowGoo metal needles, and I have another set, 2 sets. One is a 5-inch tip and the other one is a 3-inch tip of my, I think this is Knit Pro brand. Isn't it funny that I don't know for sure if this, let me see if I can find it on Knitter's Pride. So it's Knitter's Pride. My very first set of knitting needles were my Knitter's Pride needles. And then because they are made with bamboo, I wanted to give the metal needles a shot. So I ended up investing in the interchangeables from ChowGoo. So let me talk a little bit about these. So by far, the metal interchangeable set by ChowGoo is my favorite. ChowGoo needles are actually my favorite all around. I just like them. I like the cable. The cable is very flexible. It's not rigid and stiff and getting in the way. I find that the needles stay, whenever you lock them into place, they stay in place. So far, they've never come apart for me while I've been knitting in a project. So this particular set that I have I think these are the 5-inch tips. And you're going to see that I have quite a few missing here because they are currently on whips. But this set has all the way from US 2, which is 2.75 millimeters, up to US 15, which is 10 millimeters. And then for your it also comes with the interchangeables, your cords. Comes with your cords, and then you can invest in other cords like this. I bought one that was a lot longer of a cable. Now I will say some people might find this annoying. I do not, but the larger size needles you can only use with the larger cable, as in larger, like the connector, the little metal connector end is larger than the small ones. So if that is something that bothers you, then keep that in mind. For me, it has not been a problem. So I will link all of these things that I talk about as long as I can find a link, because some of these products I've had for a really long time. So if I can't find a link for the exact product, I will try to link something that is similar. But these I know that you can still get. I think I got these off of Amazon, but they are by far my favorite needles. When I work with plant fibers, I do prefer working with a wooden or a bamboo needle. So that's when I switch over to my Knitter's Pride. And you're going to see, because I've had these so long, I'm missing a lot. They're in project bags, some that are current, and then some that are projects I've been working on for years, and I just need to get the needles off of them and figure out what I'm going to do with that project. And then, so these are my 3-inch tips, which we're missing quite a bit in there. But I like to use the wooden needles for plant-based yarns because it gives a little bit more grip. I find that I have a hard time controlling my stitches when I'm knitting with plant-based fiber. If I'm using metal needles, I find they slip off of my needles much easier much easier than the bamboo needles, because these have a little bit more friction, and so it holds on to the yarn a little bit better so that the yarn stays on my needles, which is important to me. Now I have my 5-inch tips in this bag. This is actually a project or a needle case that my friend made for me for Christmas. And so I have the 5-inch tips in here, and you can see that I definitely use my 3-inch tips more. I use them a lot for like sleeves because I'll make them like a 12-inch circular, and then I can do my sleeves. But she made me this cute little, I just do this, wrap it around and tie it. But she sewed me this because these particular needles came in a plastic case, like not even as nice as this. This is okay, but the case that these came in a plastic case, and the case was falling apart. The plastic was ripping, and she made this for me, and I love it so much. So yeah, I think every set of 5-inch needle tips is in here, and then over here I store the cables. And what do I have in here? Oh yeah, like the stoppers for the cables, and then the keys to tighten up my cables. So again, Knitter's Pride, 5-inch tips, 3-inch tips, and then my ChiaoGoo 5-inch. And those are my needles that I use most often. Okay, I keep all of my needles in this just basket I thrifted from the store. All of these cases, all of the loose single needles just go in here, and I keep them in my closet so that all of my needles are together. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my 9-inch circulars because I get asked on a very regular basis how I knit my socks. I knit my socks on 9-inch circulars. I know that that is not for everyone. Some people find that it cramps their hands, that it's like really small and hard to grip onto the needle. Now, I do knit continental style most of the time, except when I'm knitting socks. I have a hard time knitting continental on 9-inch circulars. I have to do the English style of knitting because I just feel like I have a better grip on my sock needles. And I use the ChiaoGoo. I love these. I love these 9-inch circulars. This is my favorite way of knitting socks. I started knitting socks on DPNs. I keep DPNs, also ChiaoGoo brand. I keep them because I use them for the heel flap, just because it's easier to work them on a heel flap than to work it's easier to work the heel flap on a straight needle than to try to finagle this, although it's doable. And then I definitely need them for when I'm decreasing the toe. So I do use my ChiaoGoo metal DPNs for that. But for the rest of the sock, I'm using the 9-inch circulars. Let me show you my DPNs that I use from ChiaoGoo. Okay, so this is just kind of gives you an idea. This is actually US 1.5 size, so they're a little bit bigger than what I would normally use because I normally knit my socks on US 0 or 1. And I think this usually comes with a pack of 5, but I'm missing one, which is not really all that unusual for me. I don't know how needles just go missing, but they do. But as far as my sock needles go, I have multiple US 0, and I'm sorry, I don't know what that is in millimeters. And I can't find it on any of these, of course. So I have multiple of the US 0 because that is the size that I typically use for sock knitting. And so I keep multiples of those because I usually have more than one sock project happening at a time. I sometimes use US 1, so I also have multiples of those. And then I have, I think, 2 US 2s because I've done some other projects. I think mittens I had done, and I do my DK weight socks on the US 2 9-inch circulars. And then I also have a couple of these ChiaoGoo 9-inch in larger sizes, like a size 6, which I have just bought to use for when I'm doing sleeves. When I'm decreasing sleeves and I'm getting down to where it's getting pretty narrow, or when I'm doing the ribbing on the sleeve, because I like circular needles. Can I use DPNs? I most certainly could use DPNs, and that's what I did for a long time. But I'm just building my collection, and I prefer to knit on a circular needle. And I have a size 7. 6 and 7 is, I think, the needle size that I typically end up knitting a lot of my sweaters in. So yes, ChiaoGoo 9-inch circulars are another favorite needle for sure. Okay, let's talk about this little pouch. I've shown this pouch before. This is a pouch that was made specifically for me by my uncle. He used to do leather work, and I had asked him to fashion a little notions pouch for me. I actually have two of them. I have this one and I have this one. Unfortunately, I dripped something, I think maybe water on that, and I hadn't conditioned the leather. But this is the main one that I use, and it holds all of my like stitch markers, progress keepers, and those kind of things. Now, let's talk about my favorite tools that are in this tiny little notions pouch. If you can get a little notions pouch, that would be fantastic, because what I do is I take this little thing and I just plop it in whatever bag I'm taking with me. Whatever knitting project's going with me, this little notions pouch goes in. So it's constantly being tossed into bag after bag. Ideally, what I would do is have one of these with the same tools in it for each bag, but that is unrealistic for me because that would be just excessive in my mind. So this is perfect. I just pop it in the bag and it goes with whatever knitting project that I'm working on, or it just travels around the house with me. So inside this, I have a couple of pair of tiny scissors. Nice and sharp, because that's important to me. And then I have a variety of stitch markers and progress keepers. And I want to talk a little bit about my favorite ones. When it comes to stitch markers, I am very simple. I just like the tiny little plain circular metal ones. Just very simple. And so I keep a little tiny box of those. This is extra. I just throw a bunch of them into this little pouch, and then I have this wooden thing that I thrifted from the store that I keep like all my extras in. But I just keep a bunch of these tiny little metal circular ones in my notions pouch. This is what I use to mark my beginning of round, or if I'm doing like a repeating lace section, I will use these, and then I'll use a different one, maybe one with a tiny little bead on it to mark my beginning of round so that I can keep that straight in my head. I have purchased stitch markers that have really pretty things on them, but they drive me crazy to knit with because they get in the way. The beginning of round marker, if it's got something dangling off of it, it gets caught in my knitting. It's always on the wrong side of my knitting. I just can't deal with that. So I like just the very neat, compact, little round metal ones to mark my beginning of round and any repeat sections that I need to keep straightened out for myself in the pattern. Now, I do have some of the nicer handmade markers, like progress keepers. I do have those. And so I will show you some of these, and I will try to remember where I got these from, although I don't know how well I'm going to do at that. Let me just pick the ones that I know. Okay, so this one is a cute little mushroom that I got from River of A Knitter's Homestead. And see, this is like the lobster claw. So I will actually use this to mark my progress on a project. I don't always do this. When I find myself marking progress is when I'm working on a project that I'm slogging through and I'm having a really hard time staying motivated on. So what I'll do is when I start knitting on that for the day, I will put a progress keeper right there at the beginning. And then I will knit down, and at the end of the day, I'll see how far I got. The next morning when I'm working on the project, I will put another progress keeper right there. And then I will try to beat the progress that I did the prior day. I play a little game with myself. This is how I keep myself motivated to get through those big stockinette sections on sweaters. So that is mostly when I use my progress keepers. Like I said, I don't always use them. So I do like pretty ones. This is a very pretty resin and wood from Back Porch Fiber Co. And then this is from Holland Hoof Farm. They make polymer clay. Just real simple. There we go. And this one is Lindsay of Simply Serving, but I think she's changed her Instagram name, and I don't even know that she's doing stitch markers anymore. So that's just a few of them. I have other ones too, but honestly, I don't really use them as often as I use just a regular stitch marker. Now, another type of marker that I do use quite often are the light bulb markers. You get these on like certain clothing brands will have the tags attached with these little light bulb markers. Just this little simple thing. You can save them and you would probably gather enough for what you would need. However, I don't shop a lot. I don't buy a lot of clothing brand new. So I just went and ordered a pack of them off of Amazon. And I use these actually to keep track of my progress in my sleeve decreases when I'm knitting a sweater. So I'll mark my sweater decreases on the first sleeve. And then when I'm doing the second sleeve, I will take that marker and I will take it off the other sleeve and put it on the sleeve I'm currently working on. And that's just how I keep track. I don't know if that makes sense when I'm trying to talk about it right now. I think that's a pretty common practice that people do though. But that's why I really like to have the light bulb progress keepers. Okay, the next thing that I think is a must for every knitter, and this is not a tube of lipstick. This is just a nice fancy tube of my darning needles that I use to weave in my ends. This is from Back Porch Fiber Co., this particular little storage container, and you just screw off the top, and then there's various sizes of darning needles in here. So I keep this, but then I also keep a couple in here. Just because this is always being thrown in my bag, and this stays in here as my extras. But I like to have all my darning needles in one place. It really actually does bother me quite a lot when I can't find something, but I never know where all my needles are or all of my knitting tools. Like I just don't, but that really bothers me. So I have to choose not to think about it and just try to be as organized as possible. That's how I do it here. But I like having this little case to store all of my darning needles in, and then a couple in here. Okay, next thing I want to talk about, which I feel like I should have talked about this in the needle portion, but I'm not winging this. I have a list, but I'm not following the list. I'm just looking at everything that's laying around me and grabbing what I feel like grabbing next, which maybe that's a bad thing. But I'm a crocheter also, but I have lots of crochet hooks, but this little crochet hook is the perfect size. This is a size 3.75 millimeter. I think that's an F, like in the US measurements. This for me is the perfect size for picking up stitches when I drop them. I've actually seen these made like half the size that you can just throw in your project. You could actually throw it in a notions pouch like this. But because I was a crocheter first, I have a gazillion crochet hooks. I have way more than I'll ever use. So I just have these crochet hooks in random bags. I will throw them in a project bag, and I don't worry about it because I have so many of them that I inherited from my grandmother, and then I've collected them from thrift stores and stuff. But they're really handy for fixing your mistakes when you drop stitches, because it's so much easier to pick up drop stitches with a small crochet hook than it is with your needle tip. And on the same lines, I'm not much of a cable knitter, although that is about to change. I have knit cables multiple times in the past, but it's not like I enjoy color work way more than cables. So I'm going to naturally probably want to knit a colorwork sweater over a cabled sweater, although that is soon to change because I have a really beautiful cable work sweater that I'm going to be casting on quite soon, but I will talk about that when that time comes. But it's nice to have some cable needles. Some cables you can do without a cable needle, but your wider ones, no, not me. I need a cable needle to put them on, and so I just have a variety. I actually have a really nice wooden one that I don't know where it is. It's maybe in a bag somewhere. But these are just ones that I picked up at the thrift store, and I think maybe from my grandma, I inherited one from her. Yeah, but these are nice for if you're doing a lot of cabling work with wider cables. This next thing I've only been using for like a year and a half, 2 years. And it has been absolutely game-changing when it comes to knitting. It is this cording, this hollow tubing, which I'm pretty sure is called Barber cord. I want to just say, I have seen this sold in like little packets for what I think is pretty expensive price when considering I went onto Amazon and I got this big tube for like $10. I don't even know how many yards is on here. I mean, I have used a lot of it. I have cut various sizes. I love this stuff because you just put it on your needle tip, and this is real. I will link this exact one as long as it's still available because like I said, I bought this 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It is so flexible and elastic that it sticks onto my needle, and I can slide my stitches over, and I don't really have to worry about this popping off. It has happened, but that's only happened like 1 or 2 times in all the times I've used this. Whenever you have to put your sleeves on, why is my brain blanking? When you divide for your sleeves and you have to put your sleeve stitches like on scrap yarn or whatever, I just slide them onto this. And then when I'm ready to go back and work on the sleeve, I just slide those sleeve stitches back on. I put this back on and on the needle end, and I slide those sleeve stitches over onto the needle again, and it is so much easier. I also use this so that I can try on my sweaters as I'm knitting them. I will attach this to kind of extend the circumference of the needle, and I can slip it on and try it on. And I'm telling you, people, you could buy this in a little package of pre-cut sizes, but why not go get a whole big spool of it? You can share with your friends, and you can make custom sizes. I have some shorter ones cut for sleeves because I will just put the sleeve stitches on, and then I'll just tie a bow, and I can just untie it. I mean, I love this stuff. It has made my life so much easier when it comes to putting my sleeve stitches on rest, or any stitches, I mean, and then also trying on my garments as I knit them. Up next, a very simple little flat tape measure. We need these. I use these a lot. And I like the simple ones. I love the cute little pretty ones, but for me, they're out of my budget. And I just got this one at Magpie Knits in Charlottesville when we were on vacation. Susan, the owner of that yarn shop, included this in my bag when I bought my yarn. And I have a bunch of these. If I see them for like a couple dollars, I will pick one up because I like to put these in my project bags, especially when I'm knitting sweaters and I want to measure various lengths of things. I also have, I have one like this that I picked up at, did I get this at Harbor Freight? I think it was a couple dollars. I basically just like the slidey ones that I can throw in and they're not unraveling. I do have multiple ones like this, but those typically stay right here. I think I have like 3 or 4 of those in this little bin. I don't prefer to put those into my project bags because I think they get messy because they unravel. So these are perfect for that. When you've spent all that time working on your project and you dunk it back into your project bag, you want to make sure that that project is not going to slide off of those needles and you're going to have to sit there and tediously pick up a bunch of stitches, especially if it's lace work. So let me show you what I like for that. I like to have these little, I don't know, are they needle protectors? I don't even know what they're called, but they're these little silicone things. And I think these were from Laura of Back Porch Fiber Co. Quite a few of the things I have are from Laura. And I have them of different sizes and shapes. And you just put them on the end of your needle and it prevents, let me show you here. This is a small needle, but you'll get the idea. You put them on the end and it prevents your project from sliding off the needle, so you're not going to lose your stitches. And you would put it one on each end, like so. And of course, I would pick like really small needles. These are made for a little bit bigger size needles. This next tool is actually a rather new tool. I just purchased this spring or summer, I can't remember now. And it's definitely not a gadget, but it's definitely something that I resisted getting until I realized that this is probably going to make my life a whole lot easier. And I had several knitting friends telling me, yes, this is definitely going to make your knitting life easier. So I went ahead and bought the Cocoa Knits Maker's Board. I love it. It is a magnetic folder type thing. And I love this for color work. I will put my chart on here and I use the little ruler, which you do have to buy the ruler pack separate, but I highly recommend. I don't feel like this tool would be as useful to me if I had not bought the ruler packet separate, and because this is how you keep track like of your color work grid and your chart. I don't have a pattern on here right now to show you exactly what I mean, but I would put my chart on here and then I would use this and just move it up the chart as I progressed up the chart. And then because it's a like portfolio or folder style, you can put your other project pages and whatever else you want to tuck in there into the inside, and it closes up nice and neat. So this has definitely been worth the investment. I talked about this before, but I tried buying just a flat magnetic board off of Amazon that was made for like cross stitch and color work charts, but it was not as strong of a magnet as this. And then I had all my extra knitting pattern pages just randomly laying there because the magnet wasn't strong enough to hold all of them. So it was driving me crazy. I love this because I can stick the extra pages in here, close this up. This is a very strong magnet, both this and the ruler. And then you get like these, this came with them. I don't know. I don't know that I'll use those. I don't really know their purpose, but they're staying in there. So yes, this has definitely been worth the money I invested in it. So you have finished your knitting project and now it's time to block it. And so these last two tools are something that I use to finish my projects up, and they are blocking mats, which my particular brand is called, it's from the Crochet Dude. These are so old. As you can see, they've got lots of puncture marks in them. Not the prettiest color. I mean, this bright green, it's not very aesthetic for taking pictures. I would much prefer the Cocoa Knits ones. They are beautiful. They are like a, I don't know, a white, kind of white color, creamy color, much more aesthetic for photo taking. So I just don't take pictures of my knitting being blocked because this bright green just doesn't do it for me. But these were way cheaper, and I bought these when I first started knitting and blocking my stuff. So it's been many years. I bought these at Michael's craft store, which is a big box craft store here in the United States. I don't even know if they still carry this brand, but you could even use, I mean, you could buy like the interlocking play mat. That's basically all this is. Like my kids used to have this play mat that they would lock together and play on. That's what this is. That's all this is. It's just like the foam. It's foam board. I have heard some people using yoga mats. I have heard people just using towels over an old mattress. I mean, whatever you got to do, but it is nice to have a place because in order to block, now sometimes I just spread my project out and I don't pin it. But a lot of the times I do end up pinning it. And I used to just use sewing pins. And then I would end up with these little like wavy things because I would just put a single pin in. So at some point in my knitting journey, I heard about these Knitter's Pride knit blockers. Is this a Knit Picks thing? I think it might be, but I don't remember because I've had them for so long. No, it's from knitterspride.com. Okay. So basically what it is, it's these wonderful pins that are on like plastic pieces. And so you've got some longer ones and then you've got some shorter ones. And this makes it so much easier to block. This is so much better than using sewing pins. In my opinion, another knitting tool that is just so worth investing in. You may have a lot of sewing pins laying around, but let me tell you, this is going to do a much better blocking job, and it's going to be so much easier for you because you're not going to be pulling out like hundreds of little sewing pins. Okay, I almost forgot. I have one last thing I want to share with you guys. And this is like so simple because all it is a little journal. Now this one is specifically called a designer's notebook. And I found this, believe it or not, in a used bookstore in a city that we visited when we were traveling sometime. I don't even remember what city it was. I just remember going into a used bookstore because I often do that, just like yarn stores when I'm traveling. If I see a bookstore, I want to go into the bookstore. So I went in there and I found this, and it's special because it has, let me show you a blank page. So it has gridded pages, and then at the top you write your project name and the date. And so let me show you what that looks like when I actually write down my notes. So this is from my ranunculus that I just recently knitted. And so usually I try to remember to put down the date that I finished it, but I forgot to do that on this one. But I will just keep my notes, and then I always put in like either the label or a little bit of the yarn from the project. And then it has this elastic band that you flip over, and I always keep a pen inside of it because then I'm not looking for a pen when I want to mark in it. And there's some other things here in the back of this one, like, what is that? Actually, that looks like a needle gauge and then a ruler. I don't use that. Oh, I just found something. Oh, got like sticker thingies in there too. I've had this thing for years and I didn't even know that stuff was back there. Oh, tracing paper. Now that actually will come in handy for my embroidery. I'm going to leave that out because I didn't know that was in there, and I could use that for my embroidery. You don't need a fancy thing like this. I literally probably paid like $2 for this thing because it was at a used bookstore, and I don't think anyone wanted it, but you could just get a regular tablet. I like to write my stuff down. I'm kind of old-fashioned that way. I don't use Ravelry to record my projects anymore. I did do that for a while, but I found it very tedious. I rather just write it down and have it there, and then I can put like the more like the textile stuff in it. So like the label and a little piece of the yarn so that I can remember, the exact yarn that I used. And that would be my last tool that I would recommend for someone. You may like to do it digital. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, for a long time, I did not record my projects. I used to record them on Ravelry, then I stopped recording my projects at all. And I thought, I'll just write it on the pattern, or I thought, I will remember this next time I go to knit this. Well, that is a lie. I don't even know why I would think that I could remember something that I knit, like the details about something I knit 2 years ago. That is just ridiculous that I would even think that that's a possibility. But if I write it down, or if I would record it digitally on Ravelry, if I go to reknit that project, I can see my notes and I can see if I made any adjustments or what needle size I used, the cast on number, whatever size I knitted. And so that is why I recommend keeping track of your knitting projects, whether you decide to do it on a old-fashioned tablet with paper, or if you decide to do it digitally on a platform like Ravelry, or I think like Knit Companion or something like that. It's just really helpful for your future self if you ever decide to repeat a pattern. So that is the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. As I said before, I will link everything down below as much as I possibly can, because some of this stuff I've had for a really long time. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would highly appreciate if you would do that. You will find all the details of the other places I can be found online, including Instagram, Ko-Fi, and my email, all down in the video description below. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day, whatever day it is when you're watching this, and enjoy all the time you have with your knitting. Goodbye.